Welcome to our energy series. I am this week's host, Yaila, joined with Peyton and Corey. And if you are on your ascension journey or starting to tap into your intuition and reading energy, have you noticed that maybe you're becoming an energy snob and wondering how to deal? Well, that is a big question that we all get from our clients and students. So that is this week's topic. But before I forget, make sure to like, share, subscribe to each of our YouTube channels. We have a new video every week all about different topics, including energy, metaphysics, ascension, and psychic tools. So be sure to join every week. So let's kick things off with you, Peyton. What do you recommend for people when they are becoming an energy snob and wondering how to deal?
I think this is a great topic. It's just hearing the topic just makes me laugh because it's actually something that I tell all of my clients, that my goal is to turn them into an energy snob. So when we talk about being an energy snob, what are we even talking about? It's kind of a weird term, right? Well, when I think about being an energy snob, I think about someone who puts their vibration above everything else, who is so concerned with maintaining their alignment, their balance, their center, that they really prioritize that over everything else. And so when you think of it that way, because as energy workers and people on our spiritual path, our vibration is everything. It is what we are doing all of this work for, is to become masters of our vibration and keep it as high as we possibly can. And so when you start to live your life from the position of making your vibration that much of a priority, it's easy to become an energy snob. And because we're always focused on keeping our vibration as high as possible, it's really not a bad thing to be an energy snob. Normally, we wouldn't want to be a snob in most areas of our life, but this is one area where it can actually be a good thing. Because here's how this all happens and what I see from so many of my clients, and that is as you start to do energy work, you get more sensitive. And we were just talking about this in our video last week and some of our earlier videos too, that this work, energy work, and using your tools makes you more sensitive, not just in terms of trying to connect with your guides and doing your ascension work, but it makes you more sensitive in every area of your life. And the way that can play out is that certain things that used to be very normal and acceptable to you, hanging out with certain people, eating certain food, going to certain places, watching certain movies, you can't do anymore as easily as you start to do your energy work. Because what happens is you start to fine tune your frequency and you start to be able to hold yourself at a higher vibration. And what happens is you start to separate from anything that's a lower vibration in your life. And so inevitably, certain things that used to be just fine, you just can't tolerate them anymore. Like I've noticed that I can't go into certain stores. I can just drive by them and be like, no, I can't, no. The energy is just, the vibration is so different. And that's not a judgment. It's just vibrational difference. What vibration are you resonating with right now? And so many of my clients go through this as especially the ones who are really motivated and they use their tools every day and they're really conscientious and they raise their vibration really quickly and they're doing a good job of holding it. They notice that certain things start falling away from their life. They can't be around that toxic friend anymore. They can't be at that job with the toxic boss because the negativity that used to be at least survivable is no longer tolerable to them because you have raised your vibration high enough. You are no longer on the same plane of existence almost. So when I think about this, to me, that is what we're talking about with being an energy snob, is you're starting to really prioritize your vibration over everything else. And you don't want to be around toxic people anymore. Or maybe it's watch violent movies. I can't do that anymore. In fact, my husband was laughing at me a couple of weeks ago because he said I couldn't tolerate anything stronger than Disney movies anymore. And it's actually pretty true. If anything is, too violent, too, too intense, too negative. I can't do it. It does not match my vibration anymore. So have a sense of humor about it. Some things are going to naturally fall away from you as you start doing this work, but better things move in. Friends who are more supportive, sources of entertainment and information that are uplifting and positive. So it's not necessarily a negative thing to be a snob in this situation. But there is one thing that I will mention that can easily get confused about this. And so as you're, looking at things that you don't resonate with anymore, it's really important to make sure that you're not making one of two mistakes. One is that when you feel that negative vibration or that feeling that something doesn't resonate with you anymore, it's really important to make sure that you're not in judgment. Because if you're in judgment, you can be feeling negative reactions to someone, but that's not the vibrational difference we're talking about. That's you judging someone. And so you want to make sure you don't confuse actual intuitive feedback from your higher self with you just being a little judgy that day. So always check yourself to make sure you're not in judgment yourself. And then the second thing is, as you are looking at things in your life that don't resonate with you anymore, that feel a little negative to you, it's also important to make sure that you're not spiritually bypassing. And when we talk about that, it's a mistake that can happen at the early phases of our spiritual development, where we know that we want to be positive. And so we can try to be so positive and so radiating love and light that we're actually being confronted. What's causing the negative feeling is things coming up in ourself, our darkness that needs to be healed and integrated. So we want to make sure we're not denying that, pushing that down. And because if we do that, then that's just work that we're not doing ourselves. So that's one of those things that's easy to confuse with something not being in alignment with you, when really what you're looking at is something of it's your own stuff, basically, that needs to be dealt with, needs to be healed, needs to be integrated. But as long as you're doing your work, you're using your tools, you're doing your shadow work, listening to the feedback from your intuition and moving away from things that don't vibrate with you anymore is actually a really healthy thing. So it's one of those times where it's actually good to be a snob. So what do you think, Corey? How do you help people handle this new energetic snobbery that they're developing?
I loved what you said, Peyton. And when we first discussed, or we first had this topic that came up, I was like, I don't like this topic. I'm like, I'm not a snob. I don't like snobs. What about humility? What about being humble? And then, but that got me to think about it. And that's why I had you go first. If I were to rephrase this, it would be, I prefer to call it an energy connoisseur. And that's probably because, my mother was quite a snob. She was a snob. And so when we were saying energy snob, I was like, well, okay, I'm not an energy snob. But, the truth is that we do raise our vibration. We do. And it's not very easy to do that spiritual bypassing that you were talking about, Peyton, from a lot of the students that I've taught and clients that I have, because when you are starting to move a lot of energy and raising your vibration, the stuff comes up strong. And I know it did for me. And so what I talk about, that seems to me like it's a fine line between that snobbery and discernment. But it's a higher development of that discernment is what I talk to my clients and students about, is that as we go along this path, yes, there are certain people that it's very hard to be around. I love how, you can't take anything stronger than Disney. I love that. I can't do the violent films either. I'm too sensitive now. And I used to make those violent movies, I used to be able to look at the movies as, ooh, a piece of art with the makeup and all that. And I can't anymore. It doesn't matter. I tried that, that type of like spiritual bypassing where I was like, it's fine. It's just makeup, I'll analyze it. No. So what I talk to my clients and teach is that it's okay. There's a process that happens when we go on our spiritual journey. And as we're clearing lower vibrational things, density, we also call it density, and our vibration does heighten, there are certain things that, it's almost like almost like being poked by a needle, or it's not even a shutdown. It's that vibration that's too hard to take. Recently I was telling the ladies that we were driving almost a couple hours away to where I used to live, visiting a girlfriend who I love. And on the way, we could feel a huge energy shift. I mean, it felt like our heads were being squeezed by a vice. And when it comes to that energy snobbery, we were both going, ooh, this doesn't feel good. What is this? And so we were so excited to get back home. Along the way, though, we were working with a lot of energy to try and raise it where, in the car where we were. So that is somewhat of a energetic snobbery, where there are certain energies we can't tolerate anymore. And it's okay. It's okay. It doesn't mean that anybody is lesser than you or bad. That's one of the things that I learned in the beginning. When an energy wasn't resonating with me, we have this tendency, as we've all grown up, that things are either good or bad. And I'd say, this is really bad. Getting in that judgment, like you were talking about, Peyton, not judging it, but just going, ooh, I don't like my head being squeezed in a vice, this type of energy, very dense energy. I don't prefer this anymore. And so, yeah, energetic snobbery. It does happen, whether we like it or not, and as I like to call it, that energetic connoisseur, where where we all start to feel a certain energy that we're comfortable with. And even the ones that we're not to judge it, but go, ooh, yeah, no, I don't prefer this. I don't like this. I'd rather be in a higher frequency, a higher vibration. And it happens naturally. It really does. If you're on this journey, it does happen naturally. And part of that as well is getting rid of the old and all that old density. And we become, clean and fresh. It would be like having like a little baby, and taking it to the beach and leaving it out in the sun. Too much. It's just too much. Or taking a little baby or a puppy and taking it to a really loud place. Wouldn't be able to handle it. That's kind of how it feels when you become this connoisseur of energy, where you know now the difference between that lower frequency, lower vibration density versus more of a light, higher frequency and vibration. And once you go there, you can't go back. So it's a great topic. And I'm glad that we're talking about it, because at first I was like, But there you go. See, it was just a simple word. The energy of snob for me was like, ooh, that's dense. I don't like that. But when we change our perspective and talk about it on a higher frequency, what it is, it changes, and energy's always changing. So Yaila, what do you have to say about being an energy snob or connoisseur?
Well, I love your rephrase to energy connoisseur, because it makes me think, I always have everything food related. So it makes me think of like an energy sommelier, or, like you just really know your different types of energy and you kind of know how to pair it with different things. So that's where my mind goes. But yeah, this topic came up because I think we've all had our clients and students just ask, how do I deal with crowds? How do I deal with, those family members that just I don't resonate with, or just in different vibrations and beliefs, and like relationships change. One of our previous videos on growth periods, we kind of talked about that, and even like the ascension symptoms. So there's, all of this stuff kind of dovetails together. And I love what you all shared as far as, this is not a bad thing, and no, don't be in judgment. And that's one of my first pieces of advice. If you're starting to feel like you are more sensitive to the world around you, people, places, things, whatever it is, one, don't make yourself wrong. Two, get curious about it. Three, bring amusement, because that always helps you, just kind of not let yourself get wrapped up in that judgment. And it's, for me, amusement's not a spiritual bypass, but it does let you look at your shadow and be like, oh, wow, I have that. Okay, well, what's going on here? I can be more curious about those places where I am more sensitive in different areas. And we all have our different threshold as far as where those sensitivities are. I really think of being an energy snob or connoisseur as having a food sensitivity, where maybe you were eating gluten your whole life and you realized after years of eating something that just slowly wasn't working for your body, when you stopped eating that as much, your body started feeling better. And for me, once you know it, you can't unknow it. And that's where I got really picky about how I'm spending my time, who I'm spending it with, what are we doing? And it's still a learning process. I noticed for me, it shifts. So it's not always so intense and so strong, but in the beginning, when I'm first starting to understand it and learn about it, it can feel really strong until I learn the tools, until I learn what does my body need in the situation? Is it the situation? Is it the person? I start to pinpoint, what is it about this energy that doesn't feel right? And when you start getting curious and you start asking yourself a lot of questions, once you know it, you can't unknow it. So those would be my key tips to add on to what you two already shared of, just be really curious. Don't make yourself wrong or anybody else wrong. And just, this is part of the process. This is part of the journey, and energy always changes. So even if the energy is intense and rough, as you learn what works for you and what doesn't, you can shift it. You can, bring in those things that do help you feel better. You can be in those situations less often that don't feel so good. Like Peyton avoids certain stores because she's like, I don't need to shop there. Like there's some things you just decide like, no, I don't have to spend my energy there. Family members, it's a different calibration, right? Sometimes there are those situations where you will be around people who maybe are not on the same frequency. And how do you navigate that? How can you learn what your body needs, what energy feels better for you, and how can you support yourself in those different situations? So that curiosity and not being in judgment and looking at your shadow, bringing in amusement, I think are my go-tos. Obviously, along with learning different energy tools, have been such a big shift for me and clients and students that I work with. So that's what I would add. Anything else that you two would like to add on to that? Oh, pretty much straightforward. I mean, it's okay to be an energy connoisseur or snob or whatever phrase you want to call it, but just learn for yourself what works best for you. And we thank you for joining us in this week's energy series, and we'll see you next week. Again, if you liked this video, if you found it helpful, please like, share, comment, save it. We love your support and we also love your feedback. So we hope you had a great time joining this discussion. We'll see you next week.